our systems are so intertwined that at some point, just one sense starts taking over from another. So even though you can hear all the way down to those low infrasonic sounds, your sense of touch usually takes over from there because your ears stop becoming effective. But who's to say it doesn't work in the opposite direction where your sense of hearing maybe becomes diminished, but your sense of touch could then become enhanced at that level too.
Dr. Castro, diving deeper into your dissertation. We just talked about sound as radiation, but if we agree upon sound as radiation, and we said that there's other mechanisms to understand sound, can you feel sound? What does that mean?
Can we feel sound? Right. I mean, what I can do, what you can do, cool. Is there something that we all can share together in this stimulus of perceiving vibrations through something else? Yeah, pretty much. Just like how you can see kind of just outside of your visual range. You can smell things you're not used to smelling before. You can feel stuff they're used to hearing instead. Especially because the sense of touch and the sense of hearing overlap quite significantly. And matter of fact, more than any two other senses that we have. Not to say that you can't feel or perceive stuff in the other senses, but the feeling, the bandwidth of how you feel or how much you can feel and the bandwidth of how much we can hear almost overlap very closely. And that's because the sense of touch is essentially what our eardrums are made of. Now, I don't know, don't quote me on this one, it's not part of my research, but as far as I understand it, you have like a specialized version of skin that's kind of covering the inside of your ear canal, and it's very sensitive to, it's very thin, so it can react to high frequencies, but it's also thick enough to be able to withstand some low frequencies. So it's very similar. I don't know if it's exactly the same, but it's very similar. But what I was able to research and understand was, can people use the rest of their body as a way to be able to perceive those same vibrations? In fact, there's a percussionist, a deaf percussionist by the name of Evelyn Glennie. She's a dame now, which is the Scottish version of Sir, Madam. And she performs on stage barefoot, so that way when she's performing on a wooden stage, she can feel the rest of the orchestra and the rest of the ensemble, and be in time with them and be in tune with them. And that's significant because that's not the way people normally go about that. Usually you use your ears, and we live in a very ear-centric world, which means that everything is based off of the ears. Anything that's auditory is based on the ears. But obviously that doesn't work with somebody who's deaf or hard of hearing. So she relies on her feet and skin of her feet to feel all the little micro vibrations that are happening through the floor. And so that way she can stay in time and in pitch, in tune with the other members of the orchestra without having to hear them at all whatsoever.
Wow.
Kind of cool.
So since there's this overlap between these two senses, right? And if sound is really just a range of frequencies, a range of vibrations that you can understand, right? If that's correct. What you're saying is that certain sounds that we are hearing, if it matches in that range, you're also feeling it. But based on how your body perceives different senses, you are subconsciously always driven towards the auditory sense because we're auditory human beings, but you are still feeling and understand that information through the feeling.
A way to think of this is, imagine a truck driving by. Do you hear or feel it?
I usually just feel it. And I am hearing it super loud, but I notice my senses are, oh, there's a truck because of the density of the truck.
Exactly. That truck is emitting vibrations. It's not emitting sound, it's not emitting vibrations. It's emitting energy. And that energy is detectable by multiple senses. You can see it, you can hear it, and you can feel it. So the question is not, are you seeing, or are you hearing, or are you feeling it? It's, you are using the elements that you have in your body, your sensors, to be able to perceive as much information you can of that event of the truck driving by. Our systems are so intertwined that at some point, just one sense starts taking over from another. So even though you can hear all the way down to those low infrasonic sounds, your sense of touch usually takes over from there because your ears stop becoming effective. But who's to say it doesn't work in the opposite direction where your sense of hearing maybe becomes diminished, but your sense of touch could then become enhanced at that level too. Or if you're getting a signal that is then more supported to be able to move back and forth to be easier to feel at that range, which we don't have a lot of devices to be able to make vibrations available in those higher registers, but it's entirely possible.
Got it. All right. So why should people care? You can feel sound. So what?
Imagine you don't have to blast your earbuds or your headphones so to get that feeling and that sense of immersion or the sense of being there that you would otherwise have. There's other ways to be able to achieve that same recreation of an event. And that's another philosophical way of saying when something happens, you experience it with multiple senses. So if you're only using one sense to try to recreate a multiple sensory event, then you're not going to ever have the same efficacy and efficiency of recreating that event in that same immersive capacity that you originally had. Which is a mouthful of saying it's hard to recreate live shit if you can't address all the senses that were there when you were live.
Got it. So that's one big reason why virtual events and all these kinds of things, while visually we're getting really good at how we're showing live streaming something like a Coachella, but if I'm trying to actually experience and feel like I'm there, that's what's really missing in sound right now. Is I'm not getting the energy that I would if I was actually live there at that performance.
I think it's missing in virtual reality in all cases, not just sound, but like in sound and smell and the warmth and air pressure. There's all these other little details that if you're in the desert, you would expect to feel and perceive there. That's really hard to recreate on the remote sounds.
Got it. Interesting. Well, that's another great step in your dissertation. Can't wait to dive deeper.
Whoo!